In case you missed it, it is archived on our Facebook page. In fact, right now, this event has also gone live on Facebook. So you can watch it. In case any of your friends or family members do want to catch it, they can catch this on Redbricks Education's Facebook page. But moving from the global context, today our discussion will be closer to home for all of us, where we will explore SEL within the Indian education context. Almost all of us have been very, very key important stakeholders in the system. We can definitely relive our days as students. Some of us have come back to the system as educators, maybe parents, and a lot of us are hopeful citizens to make a change. So for today's discussion, I would like to introduce our panelists. Our very first panelist that we have with us that I would like to welcome is the founder director of the Teacher Foundation, Maya Menon. Here's Maya. She has extensive experience of over 30 years in improving school systems and teacher competencies. Most recently, she has spearheaded the development of the Indian Social and Emotional Learning Framework. Welcome aboard, Maya.
Thanks, Anurima.
Our next panelist for today is the co-founder at Labhya Foundation, Richa Gupta, and she strives to bring SEL programs to Indian schools at scale. She and her team were instrumental in developing the happiness curriculum implemented in Delhi government schools. Good evening, Richa.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me.
Our third panelist for today is Shaheen Mistri, who founded Teach for India with the audacious vision of providing an excellent education to all children across India by building a movement of leaders committed to ending educational inequity. Welcome, Shaheen.
Thank you so much.
And with that, I think we can start the discussion. We've covered a few housekeeping rules where we'll use the question answer box for questions that you may have. At the end of the discussion, our panelists will look at answering these based on time, but we'll answer as many as possible. That's our promise. And through this, the chat box is open initially. If the panelists would like to share any information, we would share that through the chat box. So let's get into this discussion. And I'd like to start by saying that there is a lot of debate in the education world about whether the Indian education system allows our children to be future ready, whether the skills and attitudes that we're developing in our schools will help them face a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So I would like to ask all of you panelists about what are your thoughts on this debate. Maya, would you like to go first?
Sure, yes. Okay, so your question is, are we ready? Is the Indian education system ready to, as far as children are concerned? I would give a short and sad answer, which is no. I don't think our education system is prepared for nurturing our children to be future ready, or more importantly, humanity ready, people ready. We boast of so much progress in various fields, whether it's technology or medicine or hospitality, defense, manufacturing, etc., etc. But we fool ourselves because we're constantly forgetting, are we developing the human wealth and human capital of our country, and appropriately developing the human capital of our country? And that would be the children. And it's primarily because our priorities for school education continues to be very short-sighted and skewed, barring, of course, a few notable and remarkable exceptions. It's good for us to remind ourselves of Zoe Wiles, who's from the Institute of Humane Education. Her quote, she says, "The world becomes what we teach." And I like to extend that quote by saying the world will not become what we don't teach, and our country will not become, if we are not teaching it. And what do we not teach? The vital curriculum that we are leaving out is, how do you teach for a sense of personal identity and personhood? How do you teach children to be courageous, how to handle failure, how to handle trauma, how to take risks, take decisions in their life, how to be kind and empathetic, how to develop a sense of a sense of connectedness, both with the community and with the natural environment. There's so much that has to be learned apart from the maths, language, science, social sciences that we teach typically in our academic curriculum. So on that note, I'm going to just stop and hand over to Anurima.
Yeah, thank you. I echo that sentiment to a large extent. And Richa, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. And I think, of course, agree a lot with what Maya shared. As people who work in education, I think this is very obvious to us, right? The challenges that our children face. I think just to put that into context, young people, India is one of the youngest countries in the world right now. We have almost more than 300 million young people across India and children. And what we need right now, and the challenges that young people face are not being addressed in the school system currently, in the education system currently. And like Maya very well put, our children need resilience, we need relationship skills, we need the motivation to learn. And I think that the education system needs to catch up to the need that our children have currently.
Right. Thank you, Richa. Shaheen, if I could actually ask you to share your thoughts, but maybe also take us a little into the journey that you've been on with your work with Teach for India schools, and how do you envision a holistic classroom? So I'd like your answer, but you could probably take us on a longer journey here.
Sure. Thank you for that, and I'll lead into the slides in a second. But just plus 100 to everything that my co-panelists said. I think a lot about the purpose of education and how it needs to be aimed at the kind of world that we wish to live in. And if we think about the kind of country and the kind of world we wish to live in, and then ask ourselves, is the current education system getting us there? I would agree with Maya's. The short answer is no. Massive opportunity for all of us on the call to then jump in and do even more. So with that, if I may, Anurima, I'll just share my slides.
Absolutely.
And jump right into my part. Very privileged and honored to be here on a subject that I love a lot, which is really what can education be? I often ask children this question: why do you come to school? If you stop a random child in a classroom and you say, why do you come to school? You'll usually find answers like, because of my friends, because, I want to study hard, I want to go to college, I have an exam coming up. And I often think, what if when you asked this question, this was the answer that kids actually gave? I come to school to learn the skills, mindsets, and values to change the world. That's why I come to school, to change my world and to change the world of others. I feel if kids answered this and they thought this was the reason they were in school, everything would be fundamentally different. And yet, if we pick up the mirror, as I think we must, especially at this time in history, and we ask ourselves, what is the truth? The truth is fairly alarming. And I'll go through these really quickly because we've all seen versions of these statistics. But learning loss is glaring coming out of the pandemic. In fact, there are estimates that say that 1 to 2 years of learning loss are going to take kids 9 to 12 years to catch up. There is going to be a collective loss of earning that our kids will have and carry forward. There is a rise in dropout rates. In fact, estimates are that 9 million more kids will get pushed into child labor in India itself. There has been a rise in poverty that is significant. And interestingly, of all the money plowed into COVID last year, only 2% went to education. So very, very grim picture ahead of us as educators and students coming in to 2 years. And the question then becomes like, how do you fix this? How do you turn this into an opportunity? I really wanted to sort of plant one seed through my slides, and it's really this idea of partnership. What would it look like for our educational mandate? We need to educate all children in the country towards a better world. What would it look like if we thought that we were doing this work in partnership with our students? So students listening on the call, what's the role, I would ask you, that you have to play, not just in your own education, but in the education of others? And educators and parents on the call, what is the role you play in bringing children alongside you, not just as recipients of the work that you do, but as real partners? My sense is something pretty fundamental could shift. And if you think about, again, the India that I think about a lot, one day in India free of poverty for all Indians, filled with love for all Indians, really, we're gonna require a massive shift in orientation, and a shift that goes from what our current thinking is, which is that we have 270 million children in the country to educate, to the shift that I just talked about. Actually, we have 270 million partners in our work of educating India. When I think about that idea of partnership, the question becomes, what kind of education will foster that sense of partnership? And I think about three things, and a kind of education that helps me live the life that I want, get the job that I want, the livelihood that I want of my choice, very important. And that has primarily been the purpose of education till date. What if we expanded that to the ability to lead others, to be able to learn how to live with others, how to respect them, to value them, to love different perspectives, to not fear differences? And finally, if the education system also explicitly tried to get our children to lead India, even when they're very, very young, first grade, second grade, looking at problems around them, beginning to try to learn the skills to solve the things that they cared about. So to me, that's the kind of education. And we talk a lot about 8 little characters at Teach for India. We call them the 8 C's. And we say, if you practice actions linked to these little guys, you will make progress towards self, towards others, and towards India. And so to bring that to life a little bit for you, I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote. And it's called, What If the 8 Little C's Came to School One Day? As you listen to this poem, I urge you to really dream of this kind of classroom, this kind of school, this kind of learning. 8 little C's came to school one day, each of them with lots to say. For you see, they pictured school not as rote and not as rules, not as teacher with a cane, not as shouting, use your brain, not as sitting all day long, not as kids who think they're wrong, not as content that is dry, not as kids who don't ask why, not as paints will make a mess, not as scary exam stress, not as silence in the room, not as punishment and gloom. No, those C's, they pictured class as rooms to weave real dreams that last, as rooms to weave real dreams that last. C1, Miss Courage, does a dance. She nudges kids to take a chance, to raise their hands when they don't know, to bravely go where they must go, to stand for things they know are right, to fearlessly walk to the light. Consciousness is number 2. He holds a mirror up to you and says, discover who you are and accept others. You'll go far and see the complex world around with all its sights and all its sounds, and with all that you learn to see, think of who you choose to be. Mr. Creativity, he comes next, a welcome change from boring text. He's like the blue sky, pure and clean, inviting your ideas and dreams. Be different, sparkly new, be free, paint and dance and sing and see all that you can really be, an extraordinary me. Curiosity is number 4. Ask questions, he says, more and more. Ask what and how and why. Ask what they love and what they need and what they dream and what they read and how they learn. And if they try, you see, he says, each child will fly. Miss Critical Thinking enters school. Set goals, she says, that is the rule. Be open-minded, rational, clear. That is the way to end all fear. And track the steps you take. Evaluate what choice you make. For each decision shifts the way you live each moment of the day. Communications number 6. Remember, we're a motley mix. And so do listen, that is key, with full attention, mobile free. And raise your voice, share what you think and what you feel out loud in ink, through drama, song, in any way, for we will change from what you say. Miscollaboration knows alone we simply cannot go as far as we together can. So girl and boy, woman and man, dream together, co-create, love each other, celebrate, be somebody's greatest fan, tell someone that yes, they can. Last, but most importantly, compassion really turns the key, spreading care across school spaces, drawing happy, smiley faces, turning boredom into fun, sprinkling joy on everyone, helping every child to read, saying here with love we lead. This is what our 8 C's do. They change our picture of a school. And so with that, I would love to invite Huda, one of our students. Huda, welcome. So as I was thinking about this poem, I said I have to show you a real example of a student that embodies these 8 C's. And since I'm talking about partnership, I cannot do this little talk without a partner. So welcome, Huda. Great to have you here with us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Didi, for having me over here.
You're welcome, Huda. So couple of questions for you, but feel free to share anything you feel is more important. This is a discussion on SEL in particular, and the importance of that. Having come through the pandemic, can you quickly try to outline some of the gaps you think children are coming back into school with?
I think the gaps that students are coming up with is with lack of, first of all, the students are very lost in the whichever academic year they are studying in, because during the pandemic, whenever they had there are very few students who were able to attend online classes, and the one who were not able to attend online classes, they didn't have any source of learning around them. They didn't have any source to get engaged with education. So because of that, the students of various grades seems to it seems like all the knowledge they have gained, all the skills, all the little skills they have developed in the past academic years seems to be vanished from their minds. And because of all the distractions, because of all the depression, because of all the phases they went through in the pandemic. And when we talk about the one who attended online classes, they are the one one who just like they were also the one who were very lost, because when the education was shifting from offline to online, it seems like the innovation that needs to be coming into the classrooms of virtual blended learning seems to be absent over there, because of which both the students who were there in the online and who were there in the offline spaces are to be stand on same lines, because they are totally confused about where they are standing in or what is going in their mind. So I think coming back to schools after 1 year, and more, many months, is like students are lost about way to start with, because throughout all the because of having online classes where they were taught only concepts, but they were not get to adapt it with the skills that they will need to suffer, the skills that they need in the situation like pandemic to deal with the emotions, to deal with the mental health was not present at online classes.
Yeah.
So I think while coming back to school, students will be like really lost and really like they will be like a way to start with, because we have lost so much.
Yeah.
And not only they have lost in education, but also in the minds, like it just seems like all the things they wanted to do, all the things they learned about themselves, it just seems to be stopped at one point of time because of all the distractions.
Yeah, and I can hear even just in your passion how overwhelming it feels for a student. And I love what you said about where do we start when there is so much that has been lost. I was talking, Huda, in my talk about the power of partnership between students and educators. Given everything you've also personally been through, your friends and those around you have been through, what is the role that you see yourself playing as a student leader to help the education of other people?
I think I would need a few seconds to think about it. It's a deeper question. Until then, can you also repeat the question once more?
Sure, Huda. Talk about the role that you play as a student leader. What's the role you play to help those people around you?
Are you talking about in the pandemic or like after the pandemic right now?
It can be before the pandemic, a project that you've been working on. I know you're really passionate about creating safe spaces, but what is the role you have played as a student to help other students?
I think the role that I played as a student is that about like I have seen like in pandemic, as my online classes were going, I was also going through the same effects of pandemic, that I was totally distracted in my mind and I was totally disturbed. And at that point of time, I took up opportunities as a great way to to just like continue working towards my dreams and goals. So I think what role I have played in like helping students that have suffered from pandemic is sharing the opportunities that I found that have impacted me a lot, and that has helped me to transform myself and to deal with the set of mindset and a set of mind that I was holding in during pandemic. Is I've shared a lot of opportunities that I was getting, the effective opportunities that that impacted me a lot. And at the same time, somewhat like reflection and morning meetings helped me a lot. Like, so what I did is that during pandemic, I was able to find about the state of mind I was in, what I was going through, just because of reflections and the consciousness that was lying inside me. So I thought, like, what if, like, all the students, many students get to know about where they are standing in and where, like, how they can deal with the situation they are in, and like make better decisions for themselves. So what I did is I hosted a few sessions on about consciousness and reflection, the power of reflection, because it seems like whenever you are in situation like pandemic, or whenever you are in any difficult situation, reflection is something that brings back to you, that brings back to your mind. It helps you understand what you are going through mentally, and how you need to process to like to get yourself in a better position.
Yeah.
So this is what I did, because I think I whatever I used to do, like whatever I do in the education in itself, like it's something that's going to be very challenging. But one of the most important thing that children need during pandemic is about understanding themselves, because they were all, like I said, the biggest impact of pandemic is being lost, being because the pandemic appeared like ruining all the normal lives of kids. It just like some of the kids were even like their childhoods were snatched because they have to work during pandemic, as there was no source of income in the home. They have to work at the different shops and all. So I think
Baba, I think I'm gonna have to cut you off. We could sit and listen to you all day, but we have to hand over to the other panelists. But I loved that idea of spreading the power of reflection and consciousness and the small things that you can do to help students around you. So thank you so much for being here. And Anurima, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shaheen, for sharing this vision with us. And thank you for bringing a fellow visionary to this panel. Huda, I think I was very amazed to hear this kind of clarity of thought. And I think all the things that you've talked of and what you want to, help your peers with, like even the vision that Shaheen shared with us. If we were to take this to reality, Maya, would you be able to help us with just understanding, like I know you have decades of experience with working on improving school systems, on building teacher competencies. So if we actually have to build these skills into our schools, how do you think we could go about that?
Okay, thanks, Anurima. So, and thanks, Shaheen and Huda for giving that lovely sort of context. I'm just going to share some slides. So just a minute. Sorry, I'm just going to. Yeah. Anurima, just tell me if you can see the slides.
Yes, I'm able to see.
Okay, okay. So I think it's good to have a framework, and that's exactly what the Teacher Foundation set out to do. So, and that framework is called the Indian Social Emotional Learning Framework, or ISEL for short. So, and our journey in SEL, my personal journey in SEL is over 2 decades, but this particular journey in SEL for the Teacher Foundation to develop a framework called the ISEL is exactly 10 years ago. We started it. It took us about 7 years to put it together. So I'm just going to share some answers to typical questions you may have, because I think these are questions that now today pretty much it's on the lips of everybody. When we started in 2012, people were even questioning, what does social emotional learning mean? And I'm not just saying the average person on the street, I'm talking about educators, even educationists, because the term social emotional learning had not even become a commonplace in the vocabulary of educators and educationists. So, and from there, now there's such a huge change, and that's a positive change that happened in the last 10 years. So a few questions I'm going to answer now, and then I'll hand it over back, because I know, and then I'll answer some of the other questions later. So it's more about learning about SEL for Indian schools, because yesterday I think you had a discussion on SEL in the international platform. So why did we at the Teacher Foundation undertake the research on SEL in 2012? Teacher Foundation has always been committed to looking at helping schools become gentler, safer, happier spaces for teachers as well as for students, because we believe that unless teachers feel happy and safe, they're not able to actually help children feel happy and safe. So that's how we embarked on the journey. So we've done a lot of work in helping teachers be more empathetic, gentler, warmer, because typically the archetypical image of the teacher, especially the Indian teacher, is this very stern, unsmiling person in the classroom. And we need to sort of bust that myth that a stern teacher is a good teacher. Gentle, warm teachers can be very, very, and are very effective teachers, and they're the ones who remembered with love and gratitude. So, so we have always worked with teachers to help schools become gentler, and teachers love it, but they never really understood what what is the necessity to be gentle, which is why we needed to focus on the research behind it. So, and we scanned various national documents. NCRT's National Curriculum Framework of 2005 mentions it in briefly, very briefly. NEP 2020 mentions it a little bit more explicitly, but even then it's quite brief. But there wasn't no existing well-researched, articulated standards for social emotional learning of Indian school children. And I'll explain to you what standards mean. And that was, I just shared a quote of Linda Darling-Hammond, who's a well-known professor of education, particularly expert in assessment. And she says, you cannot learn without attending to social relationships and emotional development. The science is clear. So what did we do? So what was the research that TTF undertook in 2012? And it took us a long time to create a set of Indian benchmarks for teachers to know what social emotional learning competencies need to be developed in their students. In other words, they need to know, teachers need to know what are the social emotional learning competencies we need to develop in our children. And these benchmarks needed to include had to include learning outcomes in clear age bands, because a primary school teacher who's teaching grade 3 or 4 may not be interested in what are the age bands for a grade 11 or 12. So we needed to be able to distinguish clear age bands in terms of social emotional learning capabilities and skills. So how did we go about doing the research on SEL? We did it in 2 phases and 6 steps, and it took us close to 7 years. We first of all did phase 1. Phase 1 study was studying the existing research on SEL. There was nothing available in India. The closest was Singapore, who had already begun to look at SEL. But much of the research was in the West and Australia, particularly in the USA, because they had a head start of about 15, 20 years when they began to look at SEL. And based on that, we found that there were 2 or 3 clear frameworks that could be looked at. One was CASEL, which was based in the US, Collaborative of Academic, Social and Emotional Learning. SEL, which is based in the UK, Social Emotional Aspects of Learning. And of course, WHO's Life Skills, which even CBSE has used. So based on that, and we did a lot of other research, literature review also, we actually put together a hypothetical preliminary integrated SEL framework for India. But this was just us. We needed to test it out in the field, which is why we did a pilot field study with mental health professionals, psychologists, school counselors, etc. And then we did a more full-fledged study in the field in schools. We gathered data because we needed to find out, what do teachers feel? What do head teachers feel? What do experts feel about social emotional learning? And what do children themselves feel? Children from grade 4 to grade 12. And then we actually gathered the data and then put together this final I-self with guidelines for teachers to use. And then we pilot tested. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, 7 years of work. But what were we actually trying to find out? We needed to find out what are these 5 competencies that we borrowed from CASEL's framework: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and decision-making. Are these relevant for Indian schools? Should there be other competencies apart from these 5 competencies? Because CASEL had detailed it out best, perhaps, compared to WHO as well as SEL. And what are the Indian age bands? Because Indian children develop at different rates compared to other children, Western children, or children from other parts of the world. So we did a representative sampling. We gathered data from 15 locations, urban, rural, 90 schools, private government, 850 teachers, and we did focus group discussions with them. We surveyed 3,300 students across grades 4 to 12 to get what they feel about, about school, about what makes them happy, what makes them sad, etc. And then we had to do it in 10 different languages. That's why it took us such a long time, because you back translated, validate the translations, etc. So what do we find out doing this research in SEL? We found that there were very clear differences between what students feel about themselves and what teachers feel about students. By the way, I'm just sort of encapsulating it in a very, very brief way. There's a lot of research data available. So, which immediately shows a disconnect. What teachers feel about students and what students feel about themselves, perhaps there isn't enough communication happening between teachers and students. So that was one thing. Secondly, we found out that there were clear differing feelings about school and about themselves between girls and boys. So that brings in the gender lens. And then that both teachers and students consider academic success to be the most important aspect of school. Partly because children are brainwashed into thinking that it's hard college, and teachers go because they're pressured by school managements, maybe parents, etc. And these were the differences we found, that if you had to map the data back to the 5 competencies that we were looking at in the integrated SEL framework, which we were testing out in the field, found that teachers tend to give self-management or aspects of self-management of students most importance. Then came decision-making. Then came relationship management, to behave well, get along with each other, get along with adults, etc. Social awareness came fourth, and self-awareness was given the least prominence. And ironically, self-awareness was given least priority even by students, which tells you that there's a big gap. Unless you know yourself, you are not able to really learn about the world and learn about other things in the world. So for children, however, they give more priority to relationship management, because they're trying to cope with so much themselves, their peers, their parents, their teachers. Then came self-management, and thirdly, social awareness. Decision-making came fourth, and self-awareness came fifth. So that gives you an understanding of how there's a distinct difference between what teachers are feeling about students and what students feel about themselves. I'm going to just stop very shortly. So what do we do with the analyzed data? We used all the data to re-examine and modify the integrated contextualized SEL framework, which we put together from CASEL, SEL, and WHO's life skills, because that was just our hypothesis. We were testing it out in the field. Then we added additional learning outcomes based on what teachers were saying, rural teachers, urban teachers. And incidentally, we didn't see a big distinct difference between urban and rural data. Interestingly, there was marginally a little bit more evolved sensibility in the high-end schools, but otherwise there wasn't a big difference, which tells you, which is quite revealing. We corrected the age bands, because based on what teachers were feeling, that no, these are capabilities that we have seen in children of this age and not of this age. So we corrected age bands for some of the learning outcomes based on the data we gathered from teachers and from schools. Then we had to consult an expert in Indian child development stages at NIMHANS to actually validate the age bands before we could actually put it out for the public. And that's what we've done. In 2019, it's gone live on our website. It's a downloadable resource. We reworked definitions of all the competencies of the standards and the through various internal reviews, as well as we validated the corrected framework and called it ISELF. And that's where I'm going to stop. So this was the journey of our work of ISELF, basically to provide an educational resource for anybody working in the SEL space who want to, and how you can use ISELF, I'll talk about it a little later. Over to you, Anurima.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maya. This was very helpful, just the historical perspective that you gave us and the amount of work that goes into putting a framework like this. This was enlightening for us. And what I understand is that if you want to systematically build skills, we need to work on strengthening the system as well. So we have, I think, the first part of a major chunk of work that you all have put in place is having that framework. But can you also share how programs can be implemented using a framework like this?
Oh, okay. So, sorry. So it's back to me. Okay. Yes, certainly I can. So for instance, right now, maybe I have to show the framework, aspects of the framework. So I may have to go back to the slides. Sure, just a minute. So I'll just go, I hope you can see it. Yeah. Yes. So how do you use it? So first of all, we adapted CASEL's definition of SEL, and we provided a definition of SEL adapted from, so because teachers, particularly because this is a resource for teachers or for adults working the SEL space. It's not a resource for children, because you have to create a curriculum or learning items for children based on iSelf. So we've defined SEL first and foremost. This is how the iSelf framework looks, beginning with self-awareness, moving on to self-management, relationship management, social awareness, and decision-making. If you were to look at it in the form of a tree, these are the 5 competencies. Each competency is divided into is made up of 2 to 3 learning standards. And each of these learning standards had to be articulated and defined. So we've done that. And then for each of the learning standards, there are learning outcomes. And these learning outcomes are in the age band. So the competencies and the learning standards are common across all ages. But the learning outcomes have been age banded, so that if you're a primary school teacher, you'll just look at the age bands of learning outcomes that you're working with, of the children that you're working with, vis-a-vis a middle school teacher or a high school teacher. So the age bands are for the learning outcomes. And for each of the age bands, we've also provided learning opportunities, so that if anybody wants to use it, there are already some ideas from that you can actually work on and develop. So this is the iSelf tree. And if you were to delve a little deeper, let's just look at self-awareness. This is how the definition of self-awareness is provided. This is one of the standards, and this is how the learning outcomes are mapped out across the different age bands. Say, for instance, 6 to 8 years, we have simple learning outcomes like accurately label emotions and recognize how they're linked to behavior. Whereas if you look at 11 to 13-year-olds, it's about recognizing that one's emotional responses can be distinct or different from others in the same situation. And if you were to look at even older, if you look at the 16 to 18 age band, you have examined ways of dealing with conflicting thoughts and emotions. So you can see that it evolves, it becomes systematically more evolved as the learning outcomes proceed across the age bands. And then you can see the learning opportunities. Teachers may, or anybody using iSelf framework could use it. Students are given opportunities too. So these give you ideas of activities that you can do with children. So how is iSelf useful for schools, which is what Anurima was asking me. State governments, departments of education, state governments can develop their SEL curriculum based on iSelf, because this is truly developed in India. You're not borrowing something from the West, because a lot of where schools are using SEL curriculums, it's been developed in other parts of the world. We need something that's completely India specific. So that's one thing. You can develop different kinds of SEL curriculums. Teachers will know what opportunities they must provide their students in order to develop these SEL competencies. So teachers can't say that, oh, this child is not self-aware, or this child doesn't have good relationship skills. But the point is that has the teacher or is the school providing opportunities to help the child develop these skills? That's the critique that each teacher or school has to make. And teachers can use iSelf alongside academic subjects. So you can actually blend it in while you're teaching regular subjects like language, math, science, social sciences, etc. But I would do that with caution. I personally don't think most of our teachers are ready for this. You can also have a separate curriculum with sports or art or music or dance or movement and so on. In fact, we've had organizations using iSelf and developing a sports curriculum, but focusing on developing SEL competencies also. Similarly, we've had another organization using movement and dance and then blending in iSelf, the learning outcomes in iSelf. I personally think the average teacher in our schools should look at a separate SEL period. We use quality circle time to develop the SEL competencies in very explicit, gentle but explicit ways. I think that's a good step forward before we start looking at blending. And when we reached out to governments, they've often said that, oh, but the teachers don't have time, so they should blend it into the regular subjects, then they can. But I don't think our teachers are yet ready, because the big question is about building teacher capacity and capability if you have to actually roll out SEL effectively. So on that note, recently ISELF was also mapped by Harvard University's EASL labs. The Graduate School of Education of Harvard University has EASL, and this has been along with various other life skills and SEL frameworks. So I'll just show you how it looks. So this is the SEL, it's the EASL lab site, and you'll see that if you look at the depth of focus in terms of cognitive, emotional, social values, etc. I was surprised. We at the Teacher Foundation was surprised. You'll see all the various frameworks, CASTLE, various things, and you'll see that you can see ISELF is across. It's been seen to have the greatest depth, partly because we have detailed it out at every across those 5 age bands, whereas all the others are not. You can see even OECD, various others. Frameworks and so on. And WHO's is also right at the bottom. So you can see ISELF sort of stuck out, seeming to have much greater depth of and focus. So I'm going to stop there at this point of time. How we can use ISELF. So how do we use ISELF? I think the bigger question is how will we make time for SEL? And I think that is something that is always the thing. When you talk to government departments, they will say that, unlike, say, the Delhi government, who's explicitly set aside time, but it's going to be a little bit of time before other governments or other states are ready for it. But I hope, there is evidence. There are signals that the government departments are getting ready for SEL. We need to prioritize SEL if we believe in developing human and humane individuals in our country, rather than just marks making machines. So on that note, I'm going to hand over back to you, Anurima.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you for bringing up the Delhi government example, because that's been an example we've all looked at. And what you shared was, I think, that, it is difficult to make time for this. So here, Richa, I would actually ask you, because you have the experience of implementing SEL programs directly with the government through the happiness curriculum and the Anand Pathyacharya. So can you share how the government partnership has helped realize the goals of these programs?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. And thank you, Maya and Shaheen, for setting the pace for this discussion to be more action-oriented. I'm glad that we've moved over from actually just discussing the need for social emotional learning for our children to actually what is happening on ground, and how educators, children, anybody who's on the call can find a place to partner with us in various ways to take this forward. I'm going to quickly share my screen, and I'll keep it very short. I'm mindful of the time. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So just before jumping into Anurima, your question, I think just quickly talking about Labhya's journey very quickly, because Shaheen is also here. I was a Teach for India fellow, and one of the first classrooms that Labhya piloted our programs in was my classroom. And my children are now entering 11th grade. So a lot of what we do is built on, our own experiences as educators, and the learnings we have had on ground over the past couple of years that we have been, working. And of course, that's what really fuels the work that we do with governments. And our learnings are really rooted in what's really happening in the system currently, not only in the classroom at the school or a district level, but at a state level and at the systemic place. Where does well-being really lie is the question that that has driven us, and it has driven us to bring it to the forefront in places where it hasn't been spoken about yet. So that's a little bit about where we come from. Very quickly, what Labhya does, we partner with Indian state governments and support them in any which way to help them implement a daily social emotional learning class across all government or public schools of the state. Like Maya mentioned, one of the most radical education programs in India right now is the happiness curriculum by the Delhi government. It was a path-breaking and actually the world's first and largest program solely dedicated to children's well-being. And the journey of creating that, the vision behind that was, of course, coming straight from the system by visionaries like the education minister, and driven by amazing partner organizations like Dream a Dream, who are not in the discussion here today, but I think we need to talk about the amazing work that they've been spearheading all this while as well, along with Teach for India and the Teacher Foundation. Essentially, what we do is we currently work with the governments of Delhi on the happiness curriculum, government of Uttarakhand, like you mentioned, on the Anandam Patyacharya, and we've also recently started working with the government of Tripura, first Northeastern government partner, on an SEL program. And some of the learnings that we've had on working with about 24 lakh children, 2.4 million children across all 22,000 schools of the state, and 3 government partnerships have been as follows. Firstly, what really mattered to all of us in the system, whether it was the education ministers that we worked with, or whether it has been the education officials, teachers, heads of schools, and parents, what has really mattered is what is happening to the children and what children can bring to the conversation, to the table for. And one of the biggest needs, or 3 of the biggest needs that we have seen, has been a need to develop higher resilience among children, a need to give children the space to build better relationships around them with peers and adults, and of course, think about learning motivation in a non-conventional sense, right? Not just why do I want to get good marks, or why should I take this stream or that stream, but really why am I coming to school, something that Shaheen also spoke about. And that has been our biggest focus, even while working with systems, that what really matters is children like Chandni, who through the happiness class understood what resilience really looks like, started to develop better awareness of her emotions and was able to communicate it. Children like Anshu was able to build a better relationship with her parents, think about the things that they were doing that were invisible to her once upon a time, and start communicating that with her parents. And of course, children like Yuvraj, who understood why they wanted to come to school beyond, that it was mandatory or they were getting to learn English, math, and science. And I think that is really where all the magic really happens in the work that we do. Some of our learnings, the first, and I think a lot of credit to Maya and her team for really establishing the need for SEL through the SEL framework. I mean, that research is impeccable. It's so long-term and in-depth. And I think drawing from that, plus the experience that we've had for over a decade on field, what we realized, number one, was that we didn't have to convince a lot of people for the need of SEL. Everyone in every conversation at every level of the government, every department of the education system actually understands that there is a lack of emotional well-being that is going unaddressed year on year, day by day in the public education system of India. We understood that governments want children to learn and to be happy. Children, of course, want positive relationships. Children want to feel listened, want to feel acknowledged. And teachers also want children to be happy, positive, and interested in learning, even though they have a lot of logistical and administrative barriers to ensure that because of the current challenges of the system. And this was the core of what we did. I think one big learning from this entire exercise of us going to governments and talking to them was that the answer is in the system. We are not coming from anywhere telling somebody what to do and how to do it. It's really just identifying the need together. And that is the stepping stone of working with governments, according to us. And that's how the Delhi government program happened. And since then, other governments have been visiting our work in Delhi, getting inspired and really trying to take it forward in their systems in their own ways. The second learning has been that co-creation is key. We are nobody to come to a government and say, this is the framework, this is the curriculum, here, do it in your 17,000 schools. I think that's never going to work. And that sort of approach is I think dehumanizing and also in a way not inclusive at all. So one of the things we have done is actually through our teams, create teams of master trainers, people in the system, and these are really enthusiastic school teachers to district teacher educators to people at the state level who have worked in education for decades altogether, who have come together and actually developed a similar and a shared understanding of what emotional well-being will look like for our children in the state. These are 30, 40 people per state that we work with. We call them our SEL master trainers, who really come together for a year before the program even starts to get launched to envision what well-being would look like for our children. What are some outcomes that we need to work on? What is the need of our children? And everything from what's happening on the ground to how to make this more sustainable is actually designed by people from the government, only supported by us in the limited ways that we can, and through our key expertise in social emotional learning. So that has been the second biggest learning that we have had, that without co-creating, without partnering with key stakeholders, the program would not be sustainable, it would not be accepted, and it would not cater to the needs of every state and every child in every school in the context that we are in. And thirdly, and the most important learning has been to keep children at the center in the middle of all of this. While working with larger systems, the voices that get lost the most are of young people and children. And it's very easy to not see that because of the overwhelming feeling of working at scale, working with millions of children and thousands of schools and thousands of teachers. And what we have consciously done is ensuring that children have a seat at the table and children have the voice to vet what we are doing, to tell us what they need, to tell us what they don't want happening, and what fears they have in the program going forward. So for example, we're currently co-creating curriculum with the Tripura government, and we have children on the panel who are actually helping us weave the curriculum, weave their needs into the curriculum and the challenges that they are facing. So that's a little bit about what we have learned and some of the powerful experiences that we have. Happy to talk about the opportunities and some bright spots that we have seen in the next half an hour. Over to you, Anurima.
Thank you. Richa, if you would like to just kind of take that a little forward and just share about some of those really key, like maybe grueling moments or like some real promising moments in this journey. I know you've shared through the stories of what Chandni and Anshu and Yuvraj, what were their dreams, but if there's something that you want to specifically talk of, we can take a minute from there.
Yes, absolutely. I think as a young person myself, working in the system, talking about well-being, there are a lot of systemic challenges that we need to go through. And of course, there is no hiding away from that. And of course, there are a lot of these learnings and bright spots, but there is still a lot of red tapeism. I think Maya spoke a little bit about how it's going to take some time for governments across to even understand this or adopt it in the essence that we want it to be adopted and not be, molded into something completely different. I think one of our biggest learnings, which was initially a challenge and then now is becoming a bright spot, is data. A lot of the debate around social emotional learning has been first looking at it in isolation, which I don't think we should look at it in. And secondly, that there is no way to substantiate the impact. And I think one of our conversations with some teachers that we work with, one of the teachers said that more than how we measure the impact of SEL, the impact of the absence of a safe space in a classroom is so much more tangible that should be argument enough for anybody to understand the need for something like this. So over the past 2 years, we've been working with some of my professors at Harvard and the University of Cambridge to come together and support us in bringing these learnings from the ground with our teachers, with our children, and really making a robust way to really capture what is happening on the ground. What is the shift in behavior? What is the shift in perspective, in mindsets, in attitudes that is happening because of the programs that we do with the governments? I think the second big thing is that one should not look at systemic social emotional learning as somebody who's driving it from the back. The ownership has to be completely with the system. So for example, when we work with the government, it's completely non-financial, and the government ensures the funds, the people, the infrastructure for every single training to happen, every single structure to be put in place in the schools, for books, for the handbooks, for the curriculum. And that level of ownership, the fact that a school teacher can go at a district level and tell other teachers that this is something that I created, this story, this activity is something that I created, tried in your classroom. I think that has been a powerful, powerful thing that we have seen in our work.
Thank you so much. I think this discussion actually can easily pan for another 2 hours. But I also see that there are a lot of interesting questions in the Q&A box, and a lot of them I think some of you have answered. Thank you, Maya, for being very, being very regular with those. But I think what we can do is take like one last question, which all three of you respond to, and then open it up to have more questions. And if any of the Q&As you'll want to address to the whole group, we can do that as well. So I want to know what is the promise ahead of us, and from what the work that each of you have done, how do you see the future of SEL in the Indian education system? So Shaheen, do you want to start us off there?
Maybe someone else can start. I'll go.
Okay.
Later.
Sure. I would open it up. Anyone who's ready. Maya, do you want to go?
Yeah. Okay. I'll give it a go. So can you just repeat that question again, just to help me gather my thoughts?
So the question was, what's the promise ahead of us?
Yeah.
So for the future of SEL in the education system, what do you see ahead of us?
Yeah. I think when we are talking about SEL, and invariably we're talking about SEL for children, I think we have to also side by side talk about SEL for teachers. And I'm not saying that just because I'm with the Teacher Foundation and we work with teachers, because you cannot have SEL working and being impactful in its true spirit with children unless the teachers know themselves have the capacity. And there's a lot of research from the West who've had a much longer journey with SEL that says that if you're looking at rolling out an SEL curriculum in a state or in a country, let's look at a state or even in a district, you have to spend at least 2 years equipping the teachers first and foremost, because first and foremost you need to be looking at their own social emotional capabilities. Do they have these capacities and capabilities themselves? And then training them and supporting them to actually nurture these capabilities in other people, notably children. I think that is important. And for that, school systems, whether it's private school managements or government school systems, since when we're talking about schools, it goes across the spectrum. We have to be looking at schools becoming proactive about that. It's not just about, oh, here's a good curriculum. It's a good thing for children to have this curriculum, so let's roll it out with our children. It is about spending adequate time in nurturing teachers' capabilities, because teachers have been part of the same system, and nobody has actually explicitly developed these capacities and capabilities in teachers. And if you want them to do it with a sense of purpose, meaning, and compassion, they need to be nurtured first and foremost. So I think schools have to be proactive about that. And also, if teachers are not able to do it, they have to also respond to that situation and be able to plug in the gaps. And that's what caring school systems are all about. And when I say caring school systems, our education system, whether it's the government system or the private school system, we have to be caring for all our stakeholders in schools. And then immediately the teachers will naturally be more caring and sensitive towards children. So that's my little take.
So, thank you. Shaheen, are you ready to go now, or should we hear from Richa?
Sure. I was reflecting on why I paused as well. And I think it's because it feels like such a fundamental need for us to invest the resources, as Maya said, not just in curriculum, but in teachers, in training, and so many different aspects linked to SEL. But what I'm sensing still, despite coming through the pandemic and understanding the gaps for kids, is still not a realistic enough understanding amongst the education community, governments, on just what it's going to take to really do this well. My sense is that this is not going to be a 15-day, 1-month bridge program, catch up kind of, we're not in that space.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's where my hesitation comes from. I think it's going to depend on will to put in the resources, the time, the preparation to actually do this with the level of integrity and depth that is required. I think what we can do again on this call and beyond is, as citizens, really demand that this be taken a lot more seriously in our schools. I think that's when systems are going to respond and understand the importance of it. Right now, there's still such strong demand for board exams, to the extent that safety of a board exam child is considered different from safety of a non-board exam child. We need the same level of sort of commitment to the learning process and to the SEL process. So that's what I think the work ahead for all of us is. And I think the work ahead for educators, schools, governments is to say, we need to put in more money. We need to put in more thought. We need to use exceptional tools that have been developed and resources that are out there. But it's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, thank you. Richa, I'd like to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I think two things. I think one, when we talk about introducing social emotional learning to our children and looking at it from a sustainable point of view, I think it needs to be rooted in equity, and it needs to be rooted in the local context of our children. So like I was sharing, I think co-creating with people who are in the system, who have stake on the ground, including children, and thinking about it from a perspective of how this will integrate into a child's life, not just in a curriculum or a school day. I think that is something that we need to think about and learn from each other about. And I think the second thing is, just as a bright spot, something, an opportunity that I see is that already we have 3 governments who are willing to put 30 minutes every single day to invest in children's well-being. Of course, we have a long way to go in terms of how that will pan out, how well we can do it, and how well we can ensure that it's actually a safe space for our children. We have more governments coming in, government of Jharkhand, a bunch of other stakeholders who are powerful enough enough to create that wave, who are in the fold right now. And I think what all of us could do is take advantage of that, take advantage of the fact that even if it's superficial, people are talking about mental health post-pandemic. We need to bring that depth as educators in the conversation and then bring the action to it as well. And I think that all of us on the call here can bring this conversation into action. And if each of us can commit to doing something, whether supporting SEL, advocating for SEL, or convincing somebody about SEL, I think then we have a chance at not maybe still bridging the gap is going to take a lot of time, but at least ensuring that well-being is looked at from a must-have perspective rather than just a good to have.
Thank you so much. I think this was a lot of depth in each response. It also has our work cut out for each one of us. If I look at the attendees and if I look at all the people who are attending today's panel, most of us are very heavily invested in the education system. So I think we can actually, there are a lot of questions still on the Q&A box, which I know Maya has answered quite a few, but Shaheen and Richa, there may be some directed to y'all. So if you would want to answer, and Maya, if there's any specific question that you feel you'd like to answer live because you may not have been able to give this level of specificity, we can take those up here. And yes, for the audience, this is the last 20 minutes to do a Q&A round, and you can post your questions in the Q&A box and we can answer those live.
So, Anurima, I think one of the questions which I just sort of gave a link in is, I think somebody asked me about circle time. I think Melina Bose. And I just gave a link. I just want to sort of for the benefit of everybody else, when we talk about SEL, SEL has to start with teachers learning to listen to children. You cannot have a curriculum for SEL without teachers being able to, look at every child, recognize each child as a human being and as a person in their own unique way. And that is what Circle Time does for us. And I personally, and this is developed by Jenny Mosley, and many of people here on this in this group may be knowing of her work. And Teacher Foundation has worked with her for the last 20 plus years. And I personally worked with her since 2000, and Teacher Foundation as an organization since 2002, when we began our work in education. And I think that it seems like a simple enough thing, sitting in a circle, teachers listening, but it's about learning to listen with empathy, listening without judgment, being genuine, not putting on an act, being able to empathize with children, and then and therefore through that modeling the behavior that children learn to know how to listen to each other and empathize with each other. So it's about teachers listening to children, children listening to each other and to the teacher. And through that, you're developing a lot of very important skills, which are completely aligned to SEL. So that's what it is.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Maya. I can see Shaheen is responding to a question posed by Nessergi. Richa, do you want to answer? There is a question which is by Renita Handa. So does the happiness curriculum look different for each state based on how it is co-created with the respective stakeholders?
Yeah, I can take that. Thank you so much for that question, Renita. Yes, definitely. Not only is the curriculum different, localized in the local language in each state, it's also freely available. It's open source on all the government school websites, so that anyone can pick it up in the state in that context to take it further. I think one of our biggest learnings has been to ensure that, like I said, children are at the center, and children always tell us the truth about what is required, what is some challenge that they're facing. We're going through this co-creation journey currently as we speak with the government of Tripura, and we realize that we don't, not only do we have to create the curriculum in Bengali, which is the majority speaking population there, but also 7 tribal languages that children speak there, for it to actually reach every single child in the state. And we're doing that with the government. So I think I'm just circling back to also what Shaheen said, that we need to understand the effort it takes. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of, action, and it takes a lot of negotiation for such a thing to happen at this scale. But like we all have identified, the need is definitely there. And definitely the contextualization is a major part of making SEL successful in all of our classrooms.
Thank you, Richa. Shaheen, I can see you've responded to a question that Nesadi had posed, but do you want to elaborate on that a little for everyone? I think the question on, you've shared a couple of links, which I think everyone will enjoy going through, but the one about how do you find ways to integrate the HCs, and if you want to just give a short answer to everyone.
Yeah. So basically what we've done with the 8Cs, and I think the power of the 8Cs is that they all start with C as well, and that they're all cute characters. So they've become very sticky and spread quite rapidly. And they're memorable. What we've done with them is we've integrated them both into curriculum standards. So we've shown teachers how they can be built into content. We've integrated them into classroom culture. So what are practices you can use at the start, end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, linked to the Cs. And we've integrated them into exposure and opportunities. So the link that I actually posted gives you all of that really clearly, and you can see how to use the 8Cs. And then, of course, you can completely contextualize it to suit your own classroom. The second link I put in there was the Kids Education Revolution website, which is one of our projects. And that has lots of stories of student leaders that I think could be really inspiring for other students to learn from. So students that have embodied the Cs, students that are change makers. It's got a lot of resources, again, to build the 8Cs. So that's a pretty good, I think, starting point.
Thank you so much. Are there any more questions from the audience? I think there's one question that's left here, and I think it's a very pertinent question, which is by Gemily, which is, why is it not compulsory in schools since it is so essential? And I think all 4 of us here would probably be asking us the same question, but any responses for this? And I also, since we have about 15 minutes and we've been doing very well on time, if someone does want to raise their hand and ask the question live, we can also look at doing that. Even if Gemily would like to ask this question with more details, we can do that. But till then,
I'll give a short. I think Gemily, maybe if Gemily wants to speak, explain
yes.
it a little bit.
Yeah, let's have Gemily speak. Yes, Gemily, we can hear you. We won't be able to see you, but we'll be able to hear you.
That's completely fine. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anurima. What my question was that, do schools need to approach or should the government kind of take an initiative to get this into schools? Of course, there is a need for social emotional learning, and we also agree with the 2 days that we've been listening to this, that it is absolutely essential. So why isn't the government taking an initiative, or should schools kind of unite together to take kind of a step forward?
I think that's an important question, Gemily. I think if you're a private school, the school can decide. The school management, the teachers can decide. But if it's a government school, the government has to decide. The Department of Education for that particular state has to decide in terms of how they're going to roll out, what is going to be the priority, etc. So, and the other important thing is that, there's a bind here. Many governments are caught between value education, life skills education, SEL. So it's all sort of, it's very confusing. There's so much of busyness in this space that you're not quite sure about what should you focus on. And partly because we're also, Teacher Foundation is part of this a large collaborative where we're looking at life skills for Indian education, Indian schools, etc. too. So it's very easy to sort of get confused between these things. The way I see it, life skills are things that are skills that will help you engage with the world outside, whereas SEL is about how do you engage with yourself. First and foremost, understand yourself, and then and accordingly then and then accordingly engage with the world outside. So I think it comes from prioritizing schools. At least the first step, the good step is, of course, that the new education policy talks about social emotional learning as well as life skills. But of course, there's a many slip between the cup and the lip, they say. We are a country of great, very good intentions, but we are terrible at implementing. And that is where I think organizations like the organizations that we all represent on the panel and many other organizations, I think the time has come for us to sort of come together because I think there is truly, and I believe that partly because after 1+ years of working as a collaborative, I think there's power in bringing about change when many organizations come together, because there's a certain momentum that gets picked up and it has a multiplier snowballing effect. So because it is important, nobody will say no, this is not important, but they don't give it time in the school curriculum, in the school day. And I think it is about you have to give it importance by assigning time. And I think that is where schools forget, or schools think that it'll happen by and by. That while we're doing this, it'll happen. We have to explicitly give it time and give it importance. I hope I've answered to some extent.
Yeah, Maya, thank you so much. Maya, I was actually looking at wellness in my own school, and I went to a lot of websites trying to get a survey, and it is so difficult. There is none that pertains to India where I can check wellness in my school. And that's why I was so interested in attending Selfest. If I can get something for, to check.
So we can, I'm happy to, you can reach out to us separately if you want to. I'm happy to share some ideas.
Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you.
If there are any more questions, we can take those up. Or if Richa, Shaheen, Maya, if there are any other questions. There are more questions in the Q&A box. I think I've seen one. Okay, I think they've probably been answered. But if there's any question that you'd want to to share with everybody and answer, we can take that up as well. Pallavi has posted a link to a feedback form, which would be great if everyone can just fill it up. It won't take more than a minute. So it'll be nice if you can fill that. And I've also opened up the chat box. So while you're thinking of questions, I also would like to pose this question to each of you who's an attendee, that while we've heard from our panelists on what the future holds for us, what's the homework that we all need to do, what's the kind of schooling you want to see? What is that dream you have? Like I think Shaheen shared her vision so well with the 8 Cs. If there are a similar vision of the kind of school you'd like to see with future children, with future students, what would that look like? So you can share that in the chat box as well. There was this one question around how the survey data talks of, so Maya, this is for you, that, you had mentioned that self-awareness was the least important for teachers and students. Yeah. And I think you had given a response, but if there are any reflections on this, because I think that's also stood out for me when I was looking at, your presentation, that how come it was actually at the lowest for both stakeholder?
I know it was revealing. I think because teachers are products of the society we live in, and there is so much of onus on marks and academic subjects, etc. That I often tell teachers that, we have to remember as teachers, we are not teachers of subjects, we're teachers of students. We're not teachers of curriculum, we're teachers of children. And a lot of times, the vast majority of our teaching community forget that because they're so caught up with the curriculum and the syllabus and so on. And I think that's where, that's the stumbling block. And therefore, they've decades have gone by, maybe generations have gone by, where teachers have forgotten, apart from, again, there are always exceptions to these practices, the fact that teachers have never seen children as individuals and unique human beings, barring maybe those few that cream on the top, who are the bright children who excel in everything and make us feel very proud. But we have to be looking at the quiet average child, the child who's struggling, and do we look upon each of those children and try to understand who are they and how can I help? How can I reach out to that child? How can I make that child feel special? And I think that needs to be part of the teacher's role also. For that, teachers need time. Teachers are not superhuman. I think too much is expected of teachers also. So therefore, school systems, education systems, government systems, we have to give time and set us, I kept saying that earlier also, setting aside time for teachers to have, connect with children. So and then if we make that as an example, then we will hopefully produce and of course do that even in our pre-service teacher education institutes, that you build the base and foundation for teaching by helping young trainees to look at children as not subjects, beneficiaries of subjects they're teaching, but more in terms of connecting with young human beings. I think that has to start at the pre-service teacher education institutes, but it has to be constantly nurtured and fostered in the school system through in-service and continuing professional development programs. That's what I think.
Thank you. And thank you for the experience that each of you bring in. I think, Maya, I know all of us are actually taking notes while you're sharing some of this. So thank you for bringing that to us. If I look at the attendees, I feel I can see names of some students, and if any of, like the way Shaheen described you all as partners in this journey, if you all want to say something, ask something to the panelists, feel free to raise your hand and I will let you speak within this. And while we have a last 5 minutes here, I would love to hear from each of the attendees on what is your dream of the Indian education system. How do you see SEL coming into the Indian education system? Leave a little chat, a little note on what's the vision that you're seeing. There's some comments that I can see. I think the panelists can see them too, on an SEL program for parents, from Dolly Sinha, from Renita Handa, empowered teachers, empowered children. Thank you for these comments. Keep them going. And Richa, Shaheen, Maya, if you'd want to respond to any of these, feel free.
Sorry, I don't want to hog the time, but I just want to quickly talk. Jamila has talked about, parents, and I think many people are saying one needs to educate parents, etc. And I think it's up to the school to educate the parents. Parents may be going the marks route partly because that's all they seem to know, or they may be knowing, or they're just anxious and they are concerned about their children. So it's up to the school to reassure them that when we look at holistic, whole child development of their child, that child will be able to stand on his or her own feet when they get out of school, and they will have a certain sense of identity and purpose and mission in life. And I think going back to what Shaheen was talking about, you lead yourself, you lead others, and then you lead the country. I think that's a lovely, very evocative way of looking at it. So I think that is what we have to look at. For instance, if a patient goes to a doctor, the patient cannot dictate to the doctor. The doctor has to educate the patient. It's the same thing with teachers. I often, there are a lot of parallels you can draw between medicine and teaching, because both are essentially caring, nurturing professions. But teaching is much more difficult, I think, because you're not able to see the impact as soon as maybe a doctor can see in a patient's wellness or cure.
True. At the chat box, there's a question for you, Richa, if you'd want to take that up. Could you talk about, this is from Melina Bose, can you talk about how you could convert state governments to give importance to SEL?
Sure. Thank you so much for that question, Melina. I think just borrowing from what we've shared today, while working with governments, while talking to the very first government partner that we worked with, we realized that everyone understands the why of putting well-being at the forefront, but very few are able to understand or have the capacity or the exposure, whether it's governments, teachers, parents, any stakeholder, on the what and the how of ensuring well-being. So everyone wants safe spaces for our children. No, nobody doesn't want it, but a lot of us don't understand how to take it forward, how to take that intention and bring it into action. And I think that's the gap where Labhya comes from, right? So of course, the Delhi government has been very progressive in its approach to education, not only in the formats of programs that they have been doing, but also how there is a demand for quality education in the citizens based on which these programs are created. So that's, of course, that has been a gateway for us to not only contribute to the well-being movement, but also learn from how systems really work and how we can mainstream well-being into the system. And since then, what has worked is the data, the evidence that we have from our programs. What has helped is the stories of children who have come and shared what has shifted for them because of the program, how the power dynamics between a parent and a teacher has shifted because of the program, right? Because we have to also understand that a lot of parents come from backgrounds where they feel inferior to our teachers, because our teachers are usually the most learned person conventionally that some of our parents meet. And the happiness curriculum, or SEL, can help teachers realize that power dynamic and really navigate through that, and parents feel more involved in their child's lives and academics as well. I think in terms of other governments, they have come and seen our work. A lot of investment has happened monetarily, infrastructure-wise, and intention-wise in well-being in the past couple of years as it has come into being and people have started talking more about it. But I think more importantly, with things like basic numeracy literacy still not being addressed properly, with things like mental health, children really showing the need for this data, showing the need for the lack of mental health interventions that we have. I think governments are now slowly realizing that more needs to be done in strengthening their own systems and also looking at well-being as a whole. And like I said, this can't be shifted around, and the picture can't be flipped if we don't look at ourselves as part of the system. If we keep looking at ourselves as external people, then we'll only do good programs, fancy camps and fancy workshops, but we won't be able to create sustainable programs. So that's where the lens is from.
Thank you so much, Richa. Being mindful of time, we're at 6:33, so I know a lot of people may want to leave. I am here for another couple of minutes, but yeah, just formally thanking all three of our panelists, Maya, Richa, and Shaheen. I know I've been going back and forth and troubling each of you, and doing odd hours of like mails coming from me. So apologies for that, but I'm really glad that we all made time to make this happen today. And thank you to each of your organizations. Shaheen, thank you to Huda as well for coming here. And I'm hoping that this is just the start of a conversation for all of us. Thank you so much, and have a nice day. I'm still here if any of you are available to just be around for another 2 minutes till people are leaving. We can kind of look at the last few comments, but feel free to also exit the meeting if you need to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone. Have a
Bye,
wonderful
Shaheen. Bye, Richa. Bye, Anurima, Renita. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, bye. And in case you've not filled the feedback form, please fill that. If you want to keep your comments coming in